we're very happy to have you here today and to talk about the school profile, which is something that I particularly quite like, so I'm very excited to speak about it. And I would love to introduce my colleagues who are helping me today. So we have Rashad from the University of Akron in the United States. No problem, welcome. We have Bridget from the American School in Dhaka, and Sudarshana from the Cathedral and John Connon School here in Mumbai. So please accept my apologies. I've woken up this morning with hardly a voice, and I do have a bit of a Scottish accent, so if you can't understand anything, please do just let me know. So it was really interesting when I was speaking to my colleagues here about the purpose of a school profile. I think there's a few myths in the university and college world about who the audience actually is. So I thought that a school profile was also for new families possibly joining the school, and that it was a piece of marketing material for both colleges and admissions and for these new families. And Bridget very politely told me that absolutely not, it is not. It should be for universities, and that actually this is a conversation and a bit of a point of contention within many schools, because it is used also as sometimes a marketing piece for new families. And it can be, I guess, used for both, but we agreed upon a very similar definition, and that it's a great way to put your school into a nice context so that other people can understand where your students are coming from. So, do you want to speak about your example?
So this is a sample of one of the school profiles which I picked up off the internet. And keeping in mind that the universities need to understand the school a little better, and the scores and the activities that our students are reporting to them in context to what the school has to offer or not, we thought it's important that the profile covers the following. The school community, so briefly talking about the history of the school and the school community, whether it's a religious school or whether you have any kind of cohort selection from regions or vicinity close to school, or is it open admission for any kind of socioeconomic background students, or is it restricted to a certain population of students. So talking a little bit about the school community. Overview of the history of the school. So just to put that a little bit in context and to make it clear, I thought I'd talk about my school. My school was conceived in 1860, and we were a religious school started by the Anglo-Scottish Education Society. So if that is brought to the notice of the reader, it also gives them a kind of a context of why the religious affiliation could be so strong, etc. And then the values that follow the religious affiliation would be automatically understood with clarity. Then the kind of curriculum offered by the school and the accreditation that the school has. The location, whether it's rural, urban, suburban, location in terms of, location would also give them, the reader, a context of how familiar the students would be in accessing information. If you're located, say, in a rural place versus a city like Bombay, it would make a difference to the accessibility to different buildings or different museums or different stimuli that can be possible over the others, which may not have that very easy access. Then whether you're a day school or boarding school, co-ed or single gender, community considerations such as whether the community that's admitted in the school is largely business, agricultural, diplomatic. So if you're a school like Bridget School, where you have the American school as population, a conglomeration of expat kids, by and large, that would give them a context too. Or if you're not, then grade levels, whether you're a K-12 school, or you just offer high school. Demographics, whether the students' citizenship, how many students that you admit are passport holders of the home country, and how many have varied representations, whether you have more boys and girls, what is the student-faculty ratio, what is the classroom setting size like, what kind of teaching is advocated for the students, and the CEB code. CEB code gives a quick access to the reader, especially in the US context, to find out quickly about what your school has to offer. And then the courses, if you can outline the courses that the school offers, whether it's a state board, a national board, an international board, or an AP A-level program, if there are any restrictions that you put upon students. And here again, I'd like to share my example. So ours is an IB, ISC, and AP school, and we highly discourage our IB students from doing any APs simply because it overlaps with a lot of work that they're already putting in, and the examination schedule overlaps with the board exams, the IB exam schedule. So I put that in my profile so the reader understands that although the school has APs available for the student is not taking it because the school puts that restriction. And with the ISC students, we put a restriction of not doing more than 3 at a time in one particular academic year, along with the national curriculum that they're already following. So it doesn't put a student who has done more or less, it just gives them the reader a perspective of what the school's guidelines for the students are. Then if your grading system is different for different curricula that you offer, you need to explicitly mention that, especially in context to your grade transcript. If you convert your percentage grades into alphabet grades, you need to give a description of what each alphabet grade represents, the range that it represents. If your school marks very conservatively, now I'm talking again with my kind of school curriculum where all of us know that ISC students have unusually high percentages in their final board exams, and that's true across the nation. And so if the school were to give that kind of correction and that kind of those kind of marks, it would not necessarily be a true reflection of the student's academic performance or potential. So the school's marking system is far more conservative, the papers are much harder, and that's not to be harsh to the student, but to make them better equipped to deal with the challenges of colleges, the academic programs in colleges. So that needs to be mentioned somewhere if you're particularly conservative in your grading system and in school versus the national curriculum. What are the graduation requirements that your school sets limits to? So for instance, if it's an international school, like the American school, and you have a certain number of APs that you need to acquire to get the graduation or the American diploma, you can get that clarified in the grade transcript. The GPA calculation, so if you're for the IB students, we do a GPA calculation of our own. So if there is something like that, then you need to give a legend which explains the GPA calculation on your transcript. Whether the school ranks, so these are things that are already there on the Common App, but if you put it on your school profile, it just gives you an overview. So again, to stress that the school profile should not be more than 2 sides at the most. Whatever is easily represented by a pie chart or a graph or a bar graph, which is an easy read to the eye for the person who's reading the application. They're going through lots of words starting from the beginning of the app to the application to the end of the application. So if you can intersperse your grade transcript, your school profile with pictures and visual demonstrations of grades, for instance, it would be helpful. Whether the grading system is weighted or unweighted, you need to, basically what you're filling on the application is what should be on the profile, so that makes it an easy read and overview. Especially for a college that's viewing your students' applications for the first time. I think once the colleges get familiar with what your school is about, and if they visited your school, it makes it very easy to put the student in context to what the school has to offer. Student data, the number of students in the graduating class, grade distribution in the students that have currently graduated, standardized test results, I think we put that up somewhere. Then the graduation requirements I talked about, academic achievements. At the bottom it talks about the ACT, SAT scores of the profile of the students, the AP courses offered at the school. If you can list them, then they'll understand why students couldn't do a particular AP course. For instance, if they wanted to do AP statistics and wasn't available at your school, then they'll understand why that wasn't taken by the student. language of instruction, special local requirements if you have any. For instance, socially useful productive work for the national curriculum versus the CAS and the IB. So if you've not written that as a school philosophy, if you have something, a program which is run by the school which fulfills the socially useful productive aspect or the community service aspect of the school, then that needs to be put into the profile, so it makes a little more contextual reading for the student, in favor of the student. And the last piece I would think was if there's a student body or a governing, a student council or any of the clubs that your school has to offer, oftentimes our students in their activity section have got into a habit of using acronyms which they're familiar with in context to the school, but the reader may not understand those acronyms. And so it's important that you encourage, first of all, the child not to put acronyms all through, but at least describe it in one place so that they can contextualize which activity they're referring to. And in the profile, if you can list the activities that the school offers within the school and some of the activities that, for instance, if there are international exchanges or nationwide exchanges that your students participate in, if you've listed that, again, it makes the reader of the application understand what's available to the student and whether the student has only stuck to what is basically required, what is required to be done in the bare minimum, or have they reached out and made use of all the activities that are available in the school. So I think most of these are now saved as a PDF document and uploaded, or if you can even put a link, I think you'll talk a little more about that in the essay. Even put a link of your school website and then a link on the school website that quickly takes you to the school profile, or put that link directly which takes you to the school profile. It just makes it that much easier for the viewer. So
great, thank you. And just want to give Andrew from the Woodstock School a shout out. He's here, so it's a really beautiful school profile. But I just want to speak a little bit about from the perspective of universities. So that sounds like a huge amount of work, a huge amount of detail, but what actually is the important and vital parts that we're looking at? So from a UK university's perspective, there are really two reasons why we would use the school profile. The first one is for recruitment. So if we're coming to your city or we're having a look at your school and we've never visited before, the school profile can be really informative to decide whether or not your school, your curriculum, where your students have gone in the past would be a good fit for our university and whether or not we should contact you to visit. And also then on the other side of the journey, once one of your students applies and we can have a look at the context of the school and of their studies. So I really love the school profiles. Whenever I can pick up a physical copy, I will, particularly because they really help me remember the school visit that I've done or the counsellor that I've spoken to and met at a fair. So I actually do carry them home, but some of my colleagues will prefer digital versions of them. They absolutely don't need to be shiny or fancy or colourful. The really kind of most important parts and vital information are the counsellor contact details, so that if we do have any further questions or queries about a student's application, we know exactly who to get in contact with quickly, so that we can turn the application around. If we are visiting, the school address is quite important. It can make things much easier. The students' interests, if there are any other extracurricular activities at your school, the curriculum and images for me, I quite like to be personally, because again, I'm quite a visual person with memory. So if I visited your school or can see your face on the profile, it helps me remember. Rashad and I, from a US perspective and a UK perspective, would agree that we both look at applications very holistically. So in the UK, we definitely view all of those points on the profile, but I think in the US they also take it a little bit further. So,
okay, so as far as the holistic review process in the United States goes, I'll just cover a little bit of that. Now, quick disclaimer, there's 4,400 schools, colleges, and universities in the United States. Raise your hand if you think that's a lot. Raise your hand if you think it could be more. So I'm going to kind of talk to you guys about public schools in the U.S., schools that are supported financially in some way, shape, or form by the federal government of the United States, and then we also have private schools. So generally, a representative like myself in admissions is going to be contacting you from one of the two of those types of schools. They will definitely review a profile completely different than another. Or in one public school might do things and review that's completely different from each other. So as I kind of talk to you guys about this and we also open it up for questions, kind of keep that in mind. I've worked for private schools, I work for public schools, so I'm happy to share with you my expertise, my information, experiences. I might not have everything, all right, but I'll definitely try my best. So really quickly, who here has a school profile right now? Just raise your hand. Okay. It's good to understand exactly, like, 'cause some of you guys are going to be here to figure out how you can improve your school profile, but then how many people do not have one at all? And you're here right now to learn everything that, good. All right. So you came to the right place. So when we talk about holistic review, we talk about a number of things Sudarshana had just talking about. Other than like your SAT, the ACT, we all understand that these things are very, very important, right? Right. All right. So, yes, they're very important, but we like to look at, pretty much everything else as well. So this is kind of like what I would call a hodgepodge of different things that we will take under consideration. So what I like to do is just kind of tell you how it is that we actually look at or use this type of information so that we can either decide how to evaluate coming to your school, like making the choice to come to your school, or also how we may evaluate your student, for in a holistic review process, right? So I like to start with GPA. It's the simplest one, right? We already kind of covered that it's definitely something that will need to be on there. How students are weighted, if they're weighted at all. Okay, that kind of helps us to know exactly if we're looking at a GPA from one of your students, if it's weighted, if it's not weighted, and how it also compares to other applicants in our applicant pool. So my school is big for engineering, so there are some students that are we're going to be looking at weighted or unweighted GPA a little bit differently, specifically if it's like in some of your math, you're in science courses, things like that, all right? So that's just one way that we can actually get more of a complete look, and we'll definitely talk about the others as well. So ranking. If a school ranks or if they do not, we don't have necessarily a preference, but we would like to know. So if a student is coming from a school that does ranking, it's very helpful to understand exactly. It's very helpful to understand exactly how the student is weighted. We talked about the GPA calculation. That's extremely important as well. The curriculum, the honors, AP, IB, and national curriculum too, very, very helpful in understanding exactly the experience that a student is going through. And whether or not, and you alluded to this as well, whether or not they are able to take AP classes with IB or not. I've visited definitely some schools where a student is really insistent on taking AP classes or taking IB classes depending on what curriculum that they selected. So if a student or if a school does not allow a student to take both, that's definitely some great information to know, like on the school profile. Now switching from how we would evaluate into how we would make the decision to whether or not to come to your school. So the University of Akron and many of our universities, we know in some general terms, like the type of student who would be perfect for our school. All right, so again, I talked about engineering, and other people are really good with business, math and science, dance and the arts, things like that. So if one of your schools is known for being a great art school, and I want to get a student that might go into like a theater program or a dance program, you can bet I'm going to be reaching out to you. So I might look at your website, but I'm also going to be looking at your school profile to understand exactly what kinds of maybe arts activities that the students are in. If I'm recruiting or if I'm trying to make a decision on coming to your school and you have no dance, or there's not like a focus on dance, then I probably will have to prioritize not coming to your school. Or if I'm going to look at, like, say, engineering or some of our other areas, then I might look at going to a school instead of yours and go to a school that is really good in math, science, and STEM fields. Okay? So I don't think it's on here. However, I wanted to talk a little bit about just like your contact information. How many people here have your contact information on your profile? Oh, good. Thank you. Yeah? Sorry, I turned around. So I might look at your profile. I might decide that it's a school that I want to target to come to your school. I might also look at some of the other places that you, like the students, have gone. But if I can't contact you by your email address, that's the best thing to have on your profile, because we're in the U.S. and colleges are coming from all around the world. So I'm probably not going to maybe wake up at 3 o'clock in the morning to give you a call. You probably don't want to talk to me at 3 o'clock in the morning. All right. So a nice email, it will suffice. If you can also definitely put your phone number on there, because if it's someone who's local, they're going to want to contact you by phone number. Mailing address as well. Now, it's not only your contact information that I'm using for recruiting purposes, but colleges and universities as well will use your contact information to reach out to you if they're evaluating a student for admission, scholarships, or other reasons. They may look at the student's transcripts, or they might even look at the school profile, and they may have a question. It could be a simple question. It could be a very important question. But being able to have that information to look at and to reach out and contact you is really, really, really important. Okay? Thank you. Sure.
It's also really important if we can't get a hold of you, yeah, to be able to have a link to the profile. So even if you can't, pardon? Oh, sorry, is this better? Okay. So even if you can't have a printed version, or you don't want to send a physical document out, often we will Google your school name and the word profile, or on your search bar on your website, we can Google it. When students are applying to the UK, if they're using the UCAS application system, the personal essay and the reference are very small. They're about 4,000 characters. So it's important for the student and the referee not to waste space discussing the context of the school when you have a profile. So if you like, you can put a link to the PDF, or we can Google it and hopefully find it online. And this can provide a lot of context. The rest of the space can be used to talk about the student personally and their accolades. So the profile can be used many times for many things. And I think, Bridget, do you want to talk a little bit about, there's a huge amount of information when you can start gathering this. This is your first one.
Hi, everybody. I don't want to repeat what Sudarshana has said, but some of it I think will be useful. I was impressed to see how many people need to start working on putting together a school profile. And it is such an important piece for your office and for your students. So, number one, it's a team effort. I mean, the pieces, as you've already seen, that go into a school profile, comes from a number of different offices. And so I work with our human resources office because in our profile it will say how many teachers from how many countries, and they need to provide that information. I think it's interesting for a university to see like, oh wow, there are teachers from around the world. It impacts the education of the students, right? I work with our admissions office because of course we're giving to reps the number of students we have and their backgrounds, where they're coming from. Of course, my principal, my director, is of key importance because he and I are going to confer about the information that we're going to share and the best way to present it. And then we work with the communications office as well. They are very helpful in putting together something that is appealing and that I don't think it has to be fancy, but I think the U.S. or the representatives need to be able to pull out information quickly. As somebody said, they're looking at thousands of applications, so we want them to be able to see the bits of information in a way that they'll easily capture it and not like give up on us. So just to give you an idea how I do it. And it's taken me years to finally find like a winning way, but I use a Google spreadsheet and I start to collect the information at the end of my school year, putting in things like, you know, a student, the GPA range of the graduating class and of the upcoming class. Now, you know, she mentioned that I said we do not use this as a marketing piece. This is an area where our admissions office might say, oh, it may not look good that we have students who, you know, have a 2.0 GPA or something. But we're not doing the profile, we're not making the profile just to look good. We're trying to convey to the universities the reality of our institution. So as I gather this at the end of the year, it's a tab. You can go on. We review our mission statement periodically. This part does not change much, but I tell you, if you have a mission statement, if you have a vision statement, you want to share that with the institutions. For me, it is the core of our school, and I want representatives to know that. And then who do they need to know on your campus? For sure, the college counselor. Just as Rashad said, they want to be able to contact us, you know, very quickly. But they might also want to know who the principal is, if they're all there for. This is something that we will change periodically. And you can see there at the bottom, we have some more graphic pieces of numbers. It might be stated elsewhere too, total enrollment, high school enrollment, things like that. But I've sometimes put things in a number of different places so that they can pick up on it very quickly. And then you can see, I think it's not that easy to see. And by the way, I have brought some paper copies of our profile if anybody wants to see it. The other kind of things that we included that Sudarshana said. One thing I will say, my school has approximately 35 students per graduating class. If you were to look online at school profiles from a school with really big senior classes, you know, Singapore American School, something like that, the amount of data that they provide, I mean, it's extensive. It's a lot more, but providing that kind of data for 35 kids, you know, it begins to be watered down. It doesn't make as much sense. So I've reviewed a lot of other profiles, and I would suggest you do the same. But what I'm providing is information that I think seems right for our particular institution and with the data that we actually have to share. And then always universities want to know where else are their students going. So we include, where the past 2 years cohorts have been accepted, not matriculated, and then, just put in the perky little flags, because it just draws people's attention. Like Joe saw immediately, oh yeah, there's Scotland, So that'll be up to you how you do it. And because some of you or many of you are just starting, I would say more than anything, just go with the basics to begin with and build on it. Do I have another slide? Oh yeah, I'll get to that in a minute. I just wanted to say a couple of other things. So that spreadsheet that I use with all the little bits of our information, I'm able to share that with the people in my team, my principal, communications, admissions, and I'll ask them all, look it over, see the information. Is there something I'm missing? Is it accurate? And it's easily shareable. The one other thing I would say before I get to this is that consider showing your profile to some admission representatives. Send it to somebody you know and say, will you have a look at this? Tell me how it looks to you. Give it a critique. I think that can be really helpful. Not that you'll redo it that year, but that kind of feedback can be really important from someone who is going to use it. And then finally, I did want to say, many of you might be familiar with NACAC, the National Association of College and Admission Counselors. If your school is a member, they do want to see a statement on it to ensure that data reported on the profile is accurate. And also, as you can see, I did ask about disclosing disciplinary information, and they do expect that a profile will say that we do disclose it or do not disclose it, so a university will be able to find that kind of information. I will admit I don't have it, so that's something I'm going to have to be doing. If you're not a NACAC member, you may feel it's not necessary, but it could be something that universities would want to know nonetheless. I think that's it. Oh, so a few hints and tips to make it visual as much as possible so that they can quickly pull information out. Show the important items in a number of ways. Get the feedback, as I said. And then, what Joe said, which I thought was brilliant, embed the link to your profile in your reference or something like that so that they don't even have to go searching for it. And it's not for your own school's marketing office. We definitely go around and around with that, but I think that's it for me.
So we do have some templates online that we can send you. If anyone does want a copy of this presentation, I'm happy to email it to you, so please just give me your card at the end. And thank you so much. We know that we're probably going to have some questions. Oh, and please do fill out the evaluation form on the app afterwards too. But does anyone have any comments or questions at the moment? Yes?
And we follow the Cambridge system, which means that we do not have the GPA. So should we mention that we don't have a GPA in our school profile, or is it enough if we simply state that we follow the O and A levels?
Yeah, well, absolutely. You wouldn't have to mention for the UK universities that you don't have a GPA if you have A levels. That's absolutely understood, and that's fine. Same for yourself.
I would definitely say if it's not, if you have an other than GPA, like whether it's not a GPA at all or anything else, just kind of talk about how the student is evaluated, or if they have like a certification that comes with their graduating or their diploma, things like that are very helpful.
Any other questions? Absolutely, yes. So SAT and ACT exams are only required in North America, absolutely not in the UK. We recognise all of the other curriculums independently.
I guess I would add, though, if you're doing just one profile to send to institutions around the world, you want to make it comprehensive so that, if it's being looked at in the U.S., so, even though I would send it to the UK and our SAT scores may not be of interest to them, it's still there because it will get into the hands of U.S. schools, for example.
In the context with this mostly in our schools with SAT or ACT consumption, what should be inspiring?
Yeah, I think the UK does recognise all of those qualifications as well. So if a student has sat them, please do send them as well.
I'm saying if you put it in the profile, it will not be too representative of the class. It could be, it was taken in this high score or
So I can just say for our institution, I don't know about Sudarshana, but we do report that. And for example, my class of 2018, I had a small percentage of students take the SAT as they intended to study outside the U.S. And that percentage was reflected. So, the university can see, 10 of 35 kids took the SAT, but it's still there.
If you can just write it's the median score calculated for X number of students, because you've already mentioned the graduating class number, they'll get a context that not all students. Actually, also number of students going overseas is something that you should mention on your profile, so that it gives them a context of how many students prefer to stay back in the home country and how many prefer to go to which part of the world. So if you can put that in, we put that as a map on the thing. So again, it breaks the monotony of words and gives you a visual relief.
Yeah. How many pages should be there in the school profile?
2, I'd say, not
2.
more than that.
And we are a CBSE school, so we don't have GPAs. So how should we go about?
No GPA calculation or no GPA not applicable.
Not applicable, that's why.
Absolutely. So what we do, because we have an ISC cohort of ISC students, also the breakup of how many were above 90, how many were above, and so on and so forth. So you can either do a graphical representation or a line graph or whatever it is,
One
but
of
it
those
gives them.
ones up there.
And I don't think you have to worry about thinking, is it wrong, is it right? If you offer some sort of explanation just to understand what you do, that will be fine, They just want to understand, no GPA, or we give percentages like this, or we use the IB scale, any of that. It's all fine as long as whoever's looking at it can just understand the context of your institution.
And if you're finding that difficult to put on your profile, you could put a one-liner in your reference explaining that, because that won't take up much room in your reference. Some profiles have students from the last graduating year, and some will have from 5 years. So it's up to yourself how you display that information. Yeah?
I do not have it from the last 5 years.
Any other comments or questions? Is there anyone who does have a profile at the moment who has any other advice for people just starting? Teresa, you said that you had a more simple profile. Yeah?
See, as of now, we are a very new school, so we don't have so much of data that you all have mentioned. We just give a little brief about the management, the school, what's the school's philosophy, the vision, and the mission statement, and a little about the cohort. That's about it. So my question here was, I want to also understand, do we mention, so we are an IGCSE school and an IB for the DB program. So do we mention the IGCSE scores? Okay. Okay. All right, fine. Thank you.
I also feel one important component which I feel we should bear in mind is there are some schools that don't require any input from the counselor or the school. Some university applications don't require that. So if it's available on the website somewhere, if you can then tell the child that this is the web link that will authenticate the scores that we put or the ranges that we put, that would be helpful. And on the transcript also, if you can put a legend of the score descriptors, is really helpful because some schools don't have space for you to upload a school profile, and they require only the transcript. So in our school, we also at the bottom of the transcript put a legend of the score descriptors. That's very helpful too.
That's interesting. The question was, how important is it to put, include information about the admission policy of the school? I think that's up to you. I mean, I know for our school, you know, we are not a selective school for admission because we are there to serve the diplomatic and NGO population in Bangladesh. And therefore, we are going to serve as many students as we can in order to be successful. When our board of directors is saying, why not more kids to these schools? Why not, you know, higher test scores and all? We say, well, when you want us to be that selective, then we might have those kind of scores. I think it is up to you to decide. In ours, that's a good question. I'm going to go back and look, but I feel like our statement does make it clear that we're quite open and not selective.
I think with reference to your question, one important point that you should mention if you have an admission policy where you don't admit where you don't have a SEN policy in place and you admit only certain some achievers and not other achievers. So if you have something like that, which is a nuance which you need to explicitly let them know, then you should. Otherwise, and if you're an inclusive school, then you should mention that as well, because it again helps the students who are struggling a little bit, but it's not reflective of their true academic potential to get fairly judged.
Thanks. I would include that a statement that we also include is that we're IB for all, and so we're not choosing which students we allow into the IB diploma program. We allow all students to enroll in it and see how they do. So that could be something of interest as a representative looks over our information.
I would definitely say as far as just evaluating a student, again, just put as much information as you can on it, and so that we will be able to put it into context. There's going to be, from the American perspective, there's going to be a lot of schools that may visit your school for, that are highly selective. They may take that under consideration, whereas others may not look at it at all. All right, so just again, if you have the space and you don't want everything to be super small on your thing here, it's definitely something that would be good to include. But just as far as the information is going to be, it's going to be best to just include everything that you can. Any other questions?
On the slide, it's mentioned 2020 grade distribution. So are those the predictive grades?
No. Oh, this?
Yeah.
It's their, the class of 220, so current seniors, and so it was when they were juniors, their grade distribution at the end of their,
Previous year.
yes. Just to try to give an idea to the universities about the class coming up.
So that means if this is for grade 11.
Right, so I'm including some grade 11 information because he may use it as he's planning to visit my country, like which schools will I visit? Oh, this grade 11
that means that 2019 is grade 10 over there. Am I correct?
Yeah, definitely. I would say if we're looking at that distribution, we're definitely looking at the students who are coming into their senior year. So when we do our recruiting process, we're definitely looking like as we start recruiting right now, we're looking at seniors going into and graduating, and then as we start to look at these profiles for the next year, we're going to be looking at those incoming seniors who are in 11th grade now. Okay.
That's a question.
Yeah, I actually have a question about what would be the advantage of having the acceptance list versus the matriculation list on the school profile?
I think for us, both of them are important. So if I see that a student has been offered a place from a Scottish institution, then I would think that school has a good idea of the degree structure. The counsellors may already have an idea, so that would make my job a little bit easier if I were to visit. And certainly if they've matriculated, that's a really strong indicator that I would definitely visit. But the acceptances as well, even if the student doesn't come, is a really big incentive for Scottish universities to visit.
And a lot of,
It's going to take up more space.
well, what a lot of schools do is they'll put an asterisk by the name of the institution at the bottom. It will say schools, matriculated to these schools, something like that.
Do any of my colleagues from other universities or colleges have any comments? No? Okay, well, please do come and give me your card at the end if you would like me to email you the presentation. And we look forward to seeing all of your lovely, informative new school profiles. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And I do have copies of my profile if you're interested.